This year's survey highlights that while construction leaders still have a lot on their plate, we're seeing the foundations for future growth being laid. However, the devil's in the details. What's key is to look more closely at the various subsectors and regional activity across the construction sector where we're seeing different trends. Yeah, there was a real mixed bag in our responses, through the regions and through the different subsectors. There was real positive sentiment coming through in the South Island and pretty good sentiment coming through in Wellington. Not so good sentiment coming through in Auckland, and probably the weakest sentiment coming through in our report was for the rest of the North Island. There was really positive sentiment coming through in the civil sector, both on current results, but especially forward-looking, and looking at their results over the next year and going forward from that point. Not so strong sentiment coming from the commercial and residential sector, especially the residential sector. And look, that's unsurprising, the residential sector, with what's going on in terms of current economic conditions. We're coming off a very high interest rate environment, and that sort of flow through of the lower interest rates hasn't really been felt yet in the residential sector. However, projects will become far more viable going forward in a lower interest rate environment. And we should see a real uplift in that residential sector. While our results are fairly similar to last year, what we noticed was there was a reduced amount of people in that sort of 12-month plus category in terms of forward work. And look, that's probably just a reflection of where the market's currently at. One real positive that came through the report was the amount of people still saying they're actively looking for staff. So that's a real positive going forward for the sector. Some people talked about, yes, they had made layoffs, but they were still few and far between in our respondents. What we found more so is that there were still a lot of people actively trying to find staff. When we asked people, what is their key issues in their business, one thing that came across quite strongly was actually people saying, hey, I need to find more staff, I need to find more skilled staff, I need to find more senior staff, but more so than anything, I need to find high-performing staff. So there still seems to be a real shortage in the industry of those high-performing, skilled people in the construction industry. From a profitability perspective, civil came across certainly the strongest, followed by commercial, and then unsurprisingly residential. So was I surprised civil had the highest profit out of our sectors? No, I wasn't. And civil's looking probably like they're in a pretty good space going forward, because as we know, in New Zealand, we've got a lot of infrastructure spend to come, and we really need to spend in that area. What else concerned our respondents? Well, there was economic issues is obviously a major one. Everyone knows the government's cut back in spending. So if they've cut back in spending, that's going to have an impact on our respondents and our clients, profit and losses, and then that which obviously flows to their balance sheets. Political issues was obviously another major. We all know what's happening in America at the moment. But look, political uncertainty does obviously, whether it's global or national, that does flow onto people's business confidence, and that's what we've seen come through, and that certainly came through in our survey results. One thing that was really emphasised by our respondents was, the lack of government jobs. There were a lot of government jobs, going back 21, 22, 23, especially 22, 23, but now we've seen a significant cutback, both in the likes of care and ora, health jobs and education jobs. That's had a big flow-on effect to our respondents in the survey, and I've seen that also come through in our clients. AI's concerning people. I guess that's more of an uncertainty, more so than not that, hey, they can't use it, or what is it, or what's AI tool can I use to advance my business. It's, what's that going to do to my business going forward? I think that's an issue for all industries, but, it still came through in our construction results. For the first time in our survey history, business growth is one of our top 5 issues, and that's obviously a reflection of current economic conditions. High interest rate environment. I've got to be careful saying higher in unemployment. It's currently, I think, 5.1%. That's a little bit higher than what it usually is, but globally, you can't consider that too high. But the business growth is obviously a major concern, and the main thing driving that is forward work. And as we saw in our survey, that 12-month plus forward work has shrunk, or has come down. So therefore, people are getting a bit more nervous when they look into the future and saying, hey, where's my next job coming from, or what does my business look like in 12 months? That's what's come forward in our survey as one of the key concerns. However, one thing that's really positive about business growth is what we just saw recently with the budget. We saw the investment boost, so that provides a fantastic opportunity for my commercial clients, because they can get new buildings up. Obviously the purchase of that building, you get that accelerated depreciation, or 20% of the building cost on day one. So that should be a real boost for the commercial market. Cash flow as being an issue was more of an issue this time than last time, but that's unsurprising given a general slowdown in economic conditions and in the market. So there's always going to be a squeeze in cash flow in that regards. But one positive against cash flow coming down is that people found it much easier to access finance. Banks are a lot more hungry at the moment. They want to lend money, and so people find it a lot easier to secure finance. And also, with interest rates coming down, feasibility of projects goes up. So if you want to get a project off the ground and your interest cost is down, obviously suddenly the project becomes more viable, and that stimulates the construction industry. As mentioned earlier, we're seeing quite contrasting trends throughout the country. In terms of what I'm seeing here in Auckland, certainly civil look like they're in a good space going forward, and if it come off the back of a pretty good year. Commercial, there's a lot more tendering going on in that space, and margins are falling. However, there's still some positive upshoots coming through, and appears to be in the last sort of 6 months, a lot more work coming on the market for people to tender for. And residential is probably what I consider the toughest sector here in Auckland. But hopefully, as economic conditions improve over the next year, 2 years, with lower interest rates and a more secure global environment, I think we'll find that sector improve. One thing I'm seeing some of the really successful businesses in Auckland doing is focusing on retaining their top talent. To do that, what they are doing is obviously putting them on bonus schemes, or they are selling small shareholdings to them to really tie them to the business. So when we get a lift in the market going forward, they're there, and they can also attract top talent to the business. And here's some more insights from our regional leaders throughout the country.
In Wellington, what we're seeing in the construction sector is that some construction businesses have had a positive year, particularly the head contractors, with some big projects winding up. Earthquake strengthening has kept some clients busy in the region. Forward work is tighter than it has been, so the next 12 months could be a different story, but many of my clients are actively tendering for work at the moment. New dwelling consents are down year on year in Wellington. This is in line with what we're seeing in the survey. The Wellington respondents are feeling fairly positive about their business performance, with increased profit margins and reasonable forward work position.
In Christchurch and Canterbury, we are starting to see the recovery from what was a difficult 2024 year. We are seeing improvements in both confidence and activity reflected in all parts of the industry. In addition to lower inflationary pressure and lower interest rates, the wider economy in Christchurch and Canterbury is strong.
We're seeing a strong and active market down here in Southern Lakes, Central Otago, particularly in the residential space. So demand for housing remains high for this region, and with several new subdivisions recently being launched or in the pipeline, we're expecting that sector to remain strong for the foreseeable future. Commercial construction has been steady, good volumes across the board, and a lot of industrial land has been or is becoming available for future development. And then in the civil side, there's a major project on the way here in Queenstown that's expected to last several more years. So overall, there's quite a lot of positivity down here.
It is interesting to hear some of the perspectives from one of our Auckland clients.
There's been a lot of publicity around some really big projects that have either been cancelled or announced or put on hold or delayed. But what I think the public should know is actually a large amount of our infrastructure spend goes into maintaining what we already have and maintaining what we've built many years ago that's coming up for lifetime end-of-life renewals. And it's not all about the big projects. There is a lot of work to be done just maintaining the assets we've built over many generations.
With growth now being a top issue for our construction business leaders, what will be required of them to achieve business growth? I think firstly from a macro conditions, we've got to see things like the investment boost, interest rates falling and the flow-on effects of them coming through, cost of living falling, more government construction projects which has been signalled by the government, and an improvement in migration might see a real improvement in that macroeconomic space. In terms of, if we come down to a micro level, well, what could business leaders be doing? I'll be looking at things such as improving your systems and your software, reducing overheads and unnecessary expenditure, upskilling staff so when things really take off, they're in a position to go well for you, and growing new client relationships. I think that's a really important thing to do, especially in a quieter time. The strength of any business lies in the strength of the team they build around them. I encourage business leaders to read the report on our website and speak to your BDO advisor for further support.